Hey guys, today we are going to talk about gluten. Now gluten is probably a word you've been seeing coming up more and more at the grocery store, in articles, in diets. Now gluten is a byproduct of wheat, rye, barley, and a couple other grains. And basically what gluten is, it's the protein, and the protein that's mostly found in wheat, which is a lot of the problem for most people who have gluten issues. I personally have a gluten intolerance. Now, I don't have celiac, which is the actual allergy to gluten, but gluten still makes me very sick. So it's an allergy, but without being life-threatening, like celiac is. I did not always know that I was allergic to gluten. In fact, I ate gluten up until like my freshman year of college, and I always felt sick. I'd seen so many doctors trying to figure out what was causing the issues. They could see that there was something wrong, but they didn't know what was happening. And that's because gluten doesn't really have a allergy test, whereas like you can test if someone's allergic to pollen or someone's allergic to bees by doing an allergy test where they take a set of needles on a plate and then they push it into your back, let it wait about half an hour, and it'll show up. Like if you're allergic, it'll break out in little red dots and everything. But you can't do that with gluten. The only test they can do is for celiac, and that is a couple of blood tests plus a test of your intestines, which is very invasive and really hard to do. It requires that you eat gluten 7 days before the test. It's a big shebang to be tested for celiac. And they have the test because people who do have it, it's very life-threatening for them to continue to eat gluten if they're allergic to it. But anyways, I do not have celiac. I've got a gluten intolerance, so it makes me sick. So the only way to really find out that I had a gluten issue was basically to cut it out. Well, to cut something like gluten out of your diet, you have to learn what gluten is and really understand where it is and why it's in things. Because it is in everything. Your big chip brands, from chips to yogurt to you name it, something has gluten in it. So to be gluten-free, you really have to learn what you're looking for. So the first thing you're looking for when you look at an ingredient list is obviously wheat, rye, barley. Those are the main three things you see. Pretty much anything that would contain any sort of flour is going to have some sort of all-purpose wheat, flour, rye, and what that issue is, it's got the gluten in it because it's the protein. It holds things together. That's why it makes bread chewy. If you've ever had gluten-free bread, you'll know gluten-free bread is nothing like regular bread because it's missing the key component of gluten. And there's nothing like gluten. Gluten holds things together when it's cooked, and it's really important for a lot of baking and things. So when you start out cutting out your gluten, you have to learn. You have to look for anything with wheat, anything that says modified food starch. That's a good way that they hide it. A lot of people make that mistake. Oh, it doesn't have wheat, it must be gluten-free. Well, that modified food starch, that contains gluten too. And they hide it in food labels, and so people who don't know what they're looking for obviously miss that. Because why would you think modified food starch contains gluten? I wouldn't have thought that. And the other big thing you're looking for is if it says caramel color. Now you wouldn't think caramel color would have gluten in it, and it's because the caramel color comes from something. It's coming from those brown ryes and things like that. And now not all caramel color has gluten. You generally have to check with the manufacturer and find out if it has gluten or not. If you live in an area where there's a local Hy-Vee store, there's usually a dietitian who can answer your questions about caramel color because some people take it and leave it either way. Now, I generally avoid it unless I know it's in something that doesn't have gluten. Like Pepsi or Diet Coke has caramel color in it to make it brown. However, I know it doesn't contain gluten because they put it on their website. So you just have to be really careful with checking labels. And if it says that it's manufactured in a facility that also manufactures wheat, you could have a problem, especially if you're really sensitive to gluten. I am not one of those people who can eat gluten one day and not eat it the next. It makes me so sick. A good 72 hours down for the count. So I don't eat it, but I do still eat. It's kind of a weird adjustment when you first go gluten-free. It takes you a while, you're frustrated, you feel like you can't eat anything, and you definitely can't go out. So you kind of become a hermit and you're mad at the world because you're allergic to gluten, and it's not fun. And I'm sure other people have way worse allergies, but when you're very first starting off with the gluten allergy, you're like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna eat today? So you kind of have to learn, but it's easy to eat gluten-free. You just have to be more attentive to what you're eating. So it's easy. You can obviously have fruits and vegetables. So those are so good for you, and people don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. So fruits and vegetables are gluten-free. You might as well enjoy them. Get your fill. You can also have rice and other starches like potatoes, the things we forget about when we have white bread every day. So you're not going to make a peanut butter sandwich for lunch. You're going to have to be a little more creative when you pack. But you can still eat. For breakfast, you can have yogurt, and then you can have gluten-free alternatives. They do make gluten-free bread. In fact, in Omaha, where I live, we have the Rotella's factory. And Rotella's just opened the biggest gluten-free bread production factory in the United States, which is awesome. However, it's not going to taste like your regular white bread does. It's just not going to. It's different because it's missing that key ingredient. So you have to remember, if you're going to eat something gluten-free that normally contains gluten, it's going to taste different. But once you've been gluten-free for long enough, you'll forget what white bread tastes like, and so you'll get used to it. But there's gluten-free bread, there's gluten-free bagels, there's gluten-free pasta. Actually, Barilla just came out with one, and they make pasta full-time. It's a full-time pasta company. And so for them to come out with a gluten-free pasta is amazing. It is so good. You just have to learn to buy things that are gluten-free that you can eat and not expect them to taste the same. You have to come up with new ideas that you like. Because you know what? You can't have runs anymore. You can't have Taco Bell anymore. It's not going to be a safe food for you to eat, even if you think you've got something safe. Because cross-contamination is a gluten sensitivity person's worst nightmare. When you go out to eat and you tell the waitress, I have a gluten allergy, they say, let me get you the gluten-free menu. They don't guarantee that your food's not going to come in contact with gluten. And in most cases, it does, which makes eating out so frustrating. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a restaurant and wanted a gluten-free menu, and they've led me like, here's a glass of water, best of luck. And you're like, really? But there are options. Cheeseburger in Paradise, P.F. Chang's, they all offer gluten-free. Noodles and Company offers a gluten-free noodle that you can get quickly. But pretty much any of your fast foods, so you can't eat Subway, you can't have McDonald's, Burger King. I mean, even if they had something on the menu, which I think Taco Bell has, you can get just plain refried beans, and they're supposedly gluten-free. However, in a place like that, they're making so many items, there's no way to avoid cross-contamination. Your food is so likely to come in contact with gluten, it makes it not worth it. Now, some places are trained better than others, and obviously different areas of the United States are going to have different gluten trainings. Here in Omaha, not a lot of restaurants are big into the gluten-free thing. It's just starting to come through, but I think maybe if you were more in like a New York City or Los Angeles where there's a lot more people, it's a lot more concentrated, and it could be the hip thing because some people do it as a diet by choice and not because they have to. But here it's not such a big thing, so you just have to watch out. You can eat at like Chipotle. They're really good. They'll change their gloves and change their spoons, and that's the main thing with being gluten-free. When you go gluten-free, you need to commit yourself and say, I'm going to be gluten-free, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to make sure everyone around me knows that I'm gluten-free so I don't accidentally get glutened. Because if you don't let people know that you have an issue, they're not going to know. And a lot of people don't know about gluten. So if you don't make them aware of what it is that you're allergic to and how you can avoid getting it, you're going to end up unhappy and not feeling well. So my advice is, if you're going somewhere and you have to eat out, either talk to the waitress, talk to the chef, make sure they understand you're allergic to gluten, I can't have these ingredients, and you make sure that they change their gloves, don't touch your stuff when they're touching gluten. That's the main issue. Or you can do what I do. I always keep a couple of gluten-free granola bars in my purse because you may get somewhere where they can't accommodate you, or they're super busy and you're not sure they're going to be able to handle the gluten-free. You still need to eat. So you pack a granola bar and you eat it, and it's not always fun, but you got to do what you have to do to make yourself feel good. So worrying about gluten-free allergies, it's a big deal. But it's important that other people understand too, and that's kind of why I'm making this video, as I feel like most people don't know what gluten is, but it is becoming a more known thing. If you go into Hy-Vee now, they have an entire gluten-free aisle, and Baker's does as well. The big grocery stores are really jumping on board, which is making things so much easier, because the more people understand about gluten, the better we can understand why it's causing issues. They say that the reason the gluten intolerances have raised so much in the last 10 to 15 years is due to the fact that we are modifying our food to feed the world. So we took regular wheat, which you can't even find anymore. The regular wheat from the 1900s is no longer grown. We have genetically modified it to make it easier to grow and easier to feed more people and to contain more nutrients that are good for you, like gluten. Because gluten is the protein in wheat, when you beef up the protein in wheat to make it better for the people who are consuming it, you beef up the gluten. Well, our bodies can't digest gluten. Even if you're a normal person, your body's still going to have a hard time digesting gluten. It's just the way it is. It's how it's made up. Its chemical anatomy just makes it hard to digest. So when you increase that and then a bunch of people eat it, and we're in today's society, I mean, we don't eat healthy. We don't eat well-balanced diets. We are heavy on the starches, heavy on the glutens, heavy on the white refined breads and sugars. So when we eat a lot of that, our body just ends up not being able to handle it. And that's why you have people like me. I ate pasta and bread for the first 20 years of my life and had no problems. But now I have a problem and I have to deal with it. So because of the change in the genetics of wheat, we have more people who are allergic to it. And that leads to a problem. And other people are saying it's just not that good for you. They've been trying to do studies to find out if wheat and gluten is just bad for people in general, even people who aren't allergic. And that's why we've gotten these gluten-free diets that have come up on, people are, cutting out gluten. There's a book about it called like the wheat belly, I think, and how they're saying gluten is making you fat. Well, being gluten-free can also make you fat, because if you go from eating gluten to eating gluten-free, and all you change is what you buy at the grocery store, if all you change is from your white bread, you go to your gluten-free bread, you are going to gain weight, because that gluten-free bread contains more fat to keep it together, because it's missing that protein. So they have to put other things in there to make it stick together and stay together and taste good. So it's not as good for you. So when you go gluten-free, if you're doing it as a diet to lose weight, you're going to need to change how you eat. You can't eat the gluten-free breads and gluten-free pastas. You're going to need to eat, brown rice and vegetables and fruits and healthy dairy. I mean, it's not a good diet option. But they are doing studies to find out whether it is good or bad for you. And my husband, who is not gluten-free, but mostly eats gluten-free because I cook and I don't eat gluten, when he gets gluten, he says he can actually tell a difference. It makes him feel tired and sluggish. Sometimes he gets headaches. There's just a lot of things that when your body adjusts to not having something, it really changes. And so if you go from not having any gluten to then eating a pizza, you're going to feel icky. And they don't know if that's because you can't digest it anymore. But what gluten really does to people who can't have it like me is it takes your villi, which look like little fingers inside your colon, and it basically kills them. So they die. So now your colon is smooth. Your colon's not supposed to be smooth. It's supposed to contain the villi that help pick up nutrients from your food. Well, if you eat gluten and it pushes down your villi, you're going to have issues because you're not getting your nutrients and it's not being properly digested. So when you're not properly digesting food, you're not going to feel good. And so once you stop having the gluten, which is causing the issue, your villi grow back and your digestion goes back to normal and you become healthy again and you don't feel as bad. But it only takes one time to kill those villi, and it takes months for them to grow back. So it's not good if you eat it. But they're wondering if that happens more and more in people who are not allergic, and that's why they don't feel good when they eat gluten, or when they cut out gluten they go, wow, my energy has increased. Wow, I feel so much better. So I don't know, I'm not a doctor, I'll say that now. These are just things that I've read personally. I just wanted to learn more about gluten and why it was making me so sick. I needed to understand why and what had changed. Because when I first went gluten-free, I was so frustrated. I didn't understand why I was having issues and no one else was having issues. So that's my research that I've done. I'd be more than happy and willing to learn anything that you guys have to tell me about gluten, because I'm fascinated with how it's bad for me and how it could also be bad for some other people. And if you think you may be allergic to gluten, just try cutting it out for a week. It's not as hard as you think. You just have to put your mind to it and learn to read those ingredients. So that is my talk on gluten today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, give this video a thumbs up. Let me know if there's something else you want to talk about, and have a good day. Thanks, guys.